Part of what makes this work really compelling to me is the opportunity to be continually experimenting, both in how we're planting things and also low-tech and simple infrastructure that can help with the growth of plants and the amplification of their numbers and all that. So in this video, I'd like to share a little experiment that's underway at the very early stages. I want to preface that this is a very rough sketch for a somewhat large-scale compost tea system that would be using hand tools in order to harvest the water, and it's an opportunity for lots of input from the community as I design and deepen this. So let me get into it. Good morning, Lenny. May I pass? No? Oh, okay, thanks. For a bunch of years we've been using these galvanized stock tanks. We really appreciate how long lasting they are, how smooth they are. It's a nice look aesthetically, I think. It has a bung fit into the bottom, and all really useful to be able to dip watering cans. You can see this is our rainwater one, clean water. We can dip a rose watering can into there, or different size and shaped cans depending on the type of watering we need to do. And for anything within 30 to 50 feet of this, it's very convenient. Well, I thought it would be nice to bring another one of these online for our high tunnel over at our neighbors, but I looked them up online and they are ridiculously more expensive. Found one used, but it sold before I had a chance to get it. And so my thought was, well, what do I have on hand to make another water holding container? There's one that I got way back when. You can see the burn marks on the side. That was from when it used to be a hot tub. It may do that again. I love the idea of having water holding systems in our garden that we use all season, then we empty them in the fall and set them up to be hot tubs for the winter, but I digress. The high tunnel out here needs a fairly large amount of water to keep up with the plant's needs, and we've been using a hose attached to the rainwater system upslope that's attached to the barn of our neighbors. That works. It's just very slow and steady. Sasha doesn't seem to mind doing that, but it takes a fair bit of time. And so if we could dip watering cans into a container, it would make life a lot easier. A container could be very near the high tunnel, so that it's convenient to bring the water in but not take up precious space inside the high tunnel. And if we could add high quality levels of fertility around plants that look like they need it while we're watering them, that would be pretty wonderful too. So we landed on a design direction based on what we had in the landscape already. This is an IBC tank. These are 300 gallons at peak, 275 gallons is what they're rated for. And this one was one that I got, I think, for $50. Somebody was storing restaurant cooking oil in this 10, 20 years ago. And they rinsed it out, but it's old oil. And they offered it, I think, anyway, it was inexpensive enough that I had it sitting around for a few years. It wasn't being used for rainwater because it's a little bit grimy. And so I thought, what does this look like to have the interior of this turn to compost tea? We can refill this with the same watering wand that we use that ultimately goes back up to the greenhouses. Right now that valve is on the west end of the high tunnel. It's easy enough to open up. It's a tiny bit leaky, but it's easy enough to put a bucket under there to catch the excess. If I put a splitter on that though, we could have a dedicated line to use a float valve to keep that tank full. For now, it's easy enough to open a valve and have this be filling in. And here's some questions that I have early on. One, absolutely want to make this less gnarly looking. I started by just wrapping some burlap on this side. This is the side my neighbor looks at, and we could have that as a simple solution to go all the way around. I'd love to hear if there's some creative solutions folks have. I was thinking about framing a simple wooden cap that goes on it, but it would need to slip off because at the end of the season we would need to dump this. Or what kind of pipe or thing could be slipped over this to both hide that cut. Did this with an angle grinder cutoff wheel, which worked fine, but it's a little sharp and haggard and a little grimy looking. So what would that look like to be smoothed over? Would love to get some ideas there. And right now it's very simply being loaded with rainwater off of the metal roof, and then it's a very informal, at the moment, aerobic compost tea of a wide range of cut off plants. There's yellow dock in here, there is comfrey, There's a bunch of dandelions, and then there's also grasses. There's some brassicas. There's some aged manures. There's some aged wood chips that have fungal life on them. And I think all of those will conspire to make some really nice rich tea. At the moment, we have simple watering cans like this, where the tips have been cut off, that facilitate dipping into grimier water. This is a very young tea. I just started this yesterday, so I don't expect it to add a ton of nourishment just yet. But it's an easy enough way to walk in and send that water. And if it clogs, we can knock it out the other way. And I think because there's excess nutrient load in this water, we'll try to avoid using it on crops like lettuce or parsley or kale that we might want to eat raw or cook lightly, but rather look for things like tomatoes that are a little anemic and less psyched on life, and give them really, really deep soil soaks, not foliar soaks, but soil soaks. Seems like a nice opportunity to feed these ginger, which have been sitting still a bit, I think, because of the lack of warmth, but maybe lack of nourishment in the soil too. What sort of other ingredients would folks be interested in seeing added to this? My ideal scenario is that we can harvest from the landscape right around in something that is compatible and overlapping with management we want to do anyway. So in other words, here's some dock that is getting ready to set seed. I know it's a tap-rooted plant. It's got lots of nutrients and minerals in there, and also it's hovering over some lettuce and some other crops that we want to see growing in here. My inclination is to cut that low with the hori, with the soil and everything, and add it to that compost tea brew. But maybe there's some other special things that folks know about that can add some magic to that tea. I found a bubbler online, an aerator that runs direct on 12 volt that I ordered from eBay. And my plan is to have the bubbler live in the high tunnel where it's sheltered from rain, and maybe put it out of the sun as well. Have a solar panel either in the high tunnel or on the south side of the high tunnel, but then run all the tubes into here and do a vigorous aeration. I don't think it needs the aeration, but it'll make it smell nicer, and I enjoy it a little bit more. It feels like a brighter, fresher tea that way. I tried using a power washer on the last little residue of old cooking oil. I think they said it might have been canola oil. To my mind, that's a little grimy, a little nasty, but I'd rather not use extreme industrial solvents to break that down. What I've learned over time is that if you have powerfully living soil, and to some extent maybe powerfully living water, aerobic active compost tea, it'll help digest and dilute some of that. I recognize the first probably 300 gallons or 400 gallons that come out of here will have residue of that to some extent. But if I'm using it as deep soil soaking around crops that we plan on harvesting later, I feel less concerned about it. It seems better to me to try to find a last use for this container than to throw it to the dump because we couldn't clean it as much as we wanted. But I'm open to hearing opinions from folks on that as well. I think solution to pollution is dilution. There's not much in there, especially at the multi-100 gallon level. This is at least 200 gallons or so. And for about $25, $30 for a used thing, I'm really happy with it. But share some ideas. I'll share updates as I get a bubbler online and how we start using it, whether or not the oil feels like it breaks down in a way that feels safe and reasonable to us. But let me know your thoughts. What about wrapping this? Are there slick solutions to put a bulkhead on here and send fluid outward? Do we have a tray just down slope that we can open this periodically and bottom soak seedling flats before they go into the high tunnel? Lots of neat ideas. Share what your thoughts are, and I'll share how it evolves. Thanks for watching.